as I was planning out the themes for our worship this fall, I decided that I wanted to do a series on gratitude. And it would end the weekend before Thanksgiving, and then we would get into the season of Advent. So as I worked out the weeks and the different themes, I realized that All Saints Sunday would fall in the middle of this series on gratitude, particularly because this is a significant All Saints Sunday for me personally. I thought, well, maybe I don't want to talk about gratitude at a time when I'm grieving so much. And then I realized that was exactly what I needed to do. And I know that you all are praying with me as I share this message today, very much from my heart. Because you see, we have to keep our gratitude for the saints along with our grief. Our gratitude and our grief must come together. And isn't that the challenge for all of us as people of faith? Remember, we started this series with the challenge, really, the call that we are to give thanks in all circumstances, not for all circumstances, but in all circumstances, which includes times when we are grieving, when we feel our human loss so deeply. And so I find myself in the middle of this tension, and it's okay to hold them both together. I can remember vividly the night that my mother died. It was October the 30th, 1989. And one of the first things I thought about was, I don't know how to live without my mother. And I thought about it some more, and I thought, well, of course, Stacey, you have never had to live without her, so you don't know how to do it. I had to trust God to give me the strength to learn. I had to trust what I could not see, what I did not know in the future, and put my trust in the one who loves me even more than my mother. What I didn't realize until a little bit later was that my mother had taught me how to live without her. See, my very first childhood memory was of the day that my mother's mother, my mama, died. October the 30th, 1964. I had just turned 3. And yes, that meant that my mother and her mother died on the same day, 25 years apart. And what happened in my family was after my mom died, my grandfather, who was in his mid-50s, his wife died suddenly, my grandmother died suddenly, that he had such a hard time going on that my family made the decision that we would move from our home and move in with my grandfather. So I watched my mother, without realizing it, how she dealt with the loss of her mother by caring for her father. So 25 years later, I instinctively knew that it would be my turn. That night, after my mother died, I spoke with my father, and I knew that it would be my place to care for him. It would be a few years later that Rick and I would make the decision to buy a home where my father could be with us and be an integral part of our family. So that kind of comes full circle, if you will. but I find it difficult for me to talk with you about my grief over losing my father this year. But it has given me some perspective, for we lost not only my father, but my father's sister, my only remaining aunt, my godmother, and they were the last of that generation in my family. And as I look back and feel the loss, I also know that there is increased gratitude. So grateful for my mother, my father, my aunt, and grateful for the family I have, and grateful for all of you, because you have become my family. And I just want to say that one of the special joys that I never anticipated when I came to Salem is to reconnect with my mother's family. A lot of you know that my mother was a Fisher, the SH kind. And so Bud Fisher was her first cousin. When I first heard Shirley talk about my grandmother, I think I was excited and sad all at the same time when she said, "Aunt Helen, your grandmother." Just a beautiful thing. But there are always things to be grateful for, even in the midst of our loss and our grieving. And I don't say that as a way to make anyone feel that their grief is not okay, because we grieve the way we need to. And you can hold grief and faith and gratitude together. I read a quote on Facebook, and I don't know who said this, but a woman told this story. She said, "When my husband was dying, I said to him, 'Mo, how am I supposed to live without you?' He told me, 'Take the love you have for me and spread it around.'" Take the love you have for those we've lost and spread it around. So each of us has our own journey of grief and loss. And each person that we name aloud today, each person we name in our hearts, is someone we give thanks to God for, even in our grief. And as I thought about grief, what is it that I wanted to address? And the component that I want to focus on is our fear of the future, because that was part of what I was saying when I said I don't know how to live without my mother. I don't know how to live without my father. I don't know how to live without my aunt. It's that fear of what we don't know, fear of the future. So how is it that we can move from this fear to trusting in God? And I want us to think again about our practice gratitude tree. Each week we've been looking at how we can get what I call unstuck from something that keeps us from a life of greater gratitude. And each week we turn over a leaf to reveal the gift we receive when we do practice gratitude. On the screen is a picture of our tree through last week, which was confidence. And that means that we're now halfway. We're getting unstuck by practicing gratitude, and we are changing leaves from hurt to love, from entitlement to grace, from nostalgia to confidence. This week, we're getting unstuck from our fear of the future. You see, when we become afraid of the future, for whatever reason, it is our faith that can help us to refocus on God, to look for the new thing that God is doing. Just as God has acted in the past to save us and keep us safe, so God will act now, even in our times of fear. So when we find ourselves afraid of the future, we can reframe our fear by practicing gratitude. Now, I'm really going to put this out here as a challenge, and know that I am taking the challenge on myself. In these times, I want you to name the things that God has done for you. If you have to, make a list. Some of us are list makers, aren't we? Make a list, write them down. There's a wonderful old song the choir has been looking at. Count your many blessings. Remember what gifts from God you do have. This is practicing gratitude, and it is a powerful expression of faith. As I was looking into this relationship between gratitude and fear, I found a couple of quotes by a Canadian writer, Robin S. Sharma, and it turns out he's known about his work on leadership. But here's the first one. Gratitude and fear can't stand the sight of each other. Now think about that, right? Think about it. What happens to you when you are afraid and you start to express gratitude to God? You feel that change, you experience that shift, right? And here's part of the reason why. His quote, gratitude is the antidote to fear. Gratitude is the antidote to fear. So I really want to invite you to try this the next time that fear threatens to keep you stuck in your life and stuck in your spiritual growth. Even in the midst of your fear, practice gratitude and embrace trust. I really like going back to definitions of words because there's always a new insight. By definition, to have trust is to have a firm belief in the reliability, truth, ability, or strength of someone or something. So for us to have trust in God, we have a firm belief in God's reliability, in God's truth, in God's ability, and in God's strength. So why should we trust in God? I want to call our attention now to our key verse for today, which is taken from the passage in Revelation. We have this wonderful vision, right? And in the middle of it is this verse. These words are trustworthy and true. When we hear this passage from the book of Revelation, it's easy for us to imagine this beautiful place. And we focus on the images captured in the song the choir has sung. The beautiful river, the tree of life bearing fruit, the healing of the nations through the leaves of the tree, the throne of God, the light of the city, right? There's no darkness, it's all light. And the saints of God gathered in this holy city. God is really giving us these images, this picture of what God is preparing for us in the future. A place of perfect peace and beauty, a place of dynamic worship, a place of perfect communion with God and with all believers. And then this beautiful assurance. These words are trustworthy and true. The words of God, this message from the Bible, the words are trustworthy because God is trustworthy. God is worthy of our trust. It reminds me of the hymn written in 1882 by Louisa Steed, and I think the words ring true to our experience. Jesus, Jesus, how I trust him, how I've proved him o'er and o'er. Jesus, Jesus, precious Jesus, oh, for grace to trust him more. Friends, as we practice gratitude, giving thanks to God and praising Jesus, our Savior, we can get unstuck from our fear of the future, and we can cling to our trustworthy God. So it's time to turn over a new leaf. From fear of the future to trust. Doesn't our trust leaf look so beautiful on our gratitude tree? And trust through gratitude brings beauty into our lives as well. My friends, when we lose someone we love, we do need to learn to live without them physically present with us. Although I deeply believe that there is a new communion with the saints above for us. But in addition to this, I believe that we also need to focus on the love with which they left us. Think about all the love that we have shared with those who have gone on to greater glory. That love never ends. We can claim that in the present. And I want us to think about our grief in more than our individual losses, but to think about our church family. We have had significant losses in the last couple of years. And yesterday, as a congregation, we were able to gather to celebrate Sandy's life. And it truly was a celebration, a giving thanks. I mean, we miss him. We do find reminders of him everywhere. And it's true that as a congregation, you might look at this list and be a little overwhelmed and think, how can Salem move forward without these people? And so we need, as a congregation, to embrace our trust in God for the future, not only of our families and our individual lives, but also the future of Salem. It's all in God's hands, and we trust our faithful God. I want to say a very personal word of thanks for all of you, because you have been a part of our family's journey. And although my father never joined Salem Church, he worshiped with us because of our online worship. When he could no longer go to his church in person, they had no online worship. And he really, I think, got a real kick out of watching me on the TV with my son Scott in his apartment. And he really loved Christmas Eve when they were all gathered in his apartment. I was right upstairs zooming the service. He couldn't get over that. You know, he was 90 when he passed. But to share grief is a holy thing. And I'm grateful for those of you who have invited me into your families at such precious times. But we are not alone. That has brought me such strength, I can't tell you, to be a part of Salem Church family. So thank you. And thank you for allowing me to share a little bit about my own journey. Before we read the names, I just want to say, thanks be to God for all the saints who from their labors rest. They are shining in glory.